Good morning, everyone. I'm pleased to be able to talk to you at the end of this engaging weekend. I've had a chance to meet many of you. I was able to attend some of the sessions, not all of them, but some of them, and I was happy to especially engage with some of you in my Arts of War session on Friday. And it was in that session that we were looking at representations of war through the lens of theater. We looked at it through the lens of literature, through the lens of poetry, and through the lens of the fine arts. And this sort of idea of the lens of arts is what I was thinking of when I was organizing the sessions for this weekend. This idea of art as a lens, I think, showed us a variety of ways of thinking about the arts, and I was able to attend Professor Kestenbaum's session yesterday, and I think we came up with a lot of interesting things. This is a list. We see art as a way of thinking about making meaning. We see art as a way to balance our lives. Art as a form of critical and creative inquiry, as pleasurable, as a human endeavor, as healing, as we saw on Friday, and as transformative. So I'm sure I could go on and on and on about all the things that art is and art does. And I was thinking, when art is taught and engaged with in a university, it not only initiates critical reflection, but it also opens up the imagination and the creative process, not only for students, but also for faculty. Students teaching us and faculty learning from them as well, and vice versa. It enriches different fields of research by allowing for interdisciplinary dialogues, and it helps to broaden our viewpoints. We could say that a campus, a university campus, is like a laboratory, which allows the arts to contemplate and negotiate past, present, and future possibilities for culture, a kind of cultural laboratory. Through art, we are reminded of what is important to us and what is important to society. And although you may be off campus right now, I hope you to continue to think of the arts as a way to use it as a lens for what is important to you. So that's sort of what I saw this weekend and what I wanted to say. And with that, I'm pleased to introduce our two speakers in a very informal dialogue, I'm told. So Dean Juarez came to the College of Fine Arts at BU about 2 years ago from the Dr. Jose Maria Luis Mora Research Institute in Mexico. He's been called a true Renaissance man of the arts because of his background in academia, his accomplishments as a conductor and as a producer of radio and television. I think I'm going to leave all the long list CV for you to read his blog. It's very interesting. But I do want to just say, among his interests are arts education, interdisciplinary arts, creativity, arts management, arts policy, Mexican music, arts theory, critical studies, cultural planning, and technology in the arts. Entering his third year, he's already led the college into a number of new initiatives. He's moved the mission of CFA to make the arts relevant for every BU student and member of the BU community. The goals include a focus on collaboration, on global perspectives, and on innovation. And I think above all, what he's doing is trying to encourage the students to think about the arts beyond the studio and broaden their vision as artist entrepreneurs and as citizens. David Howse joined the Boston Children's Chorus in 2004 and assumed the role of the executive director in 2009. In this capacity, he is in charge of the development strategies, policies, programming, and the operations of the organization. Okay, well, for this, he's done a pretty good job. He was the recipient of the Roots Cause Social Innovation Achievement Award, and in 2010 he was honored with the Boston Business Journal 40 Under 40 Award. But what is the Boston Children's Chorus? And I'm going to let the late Senator Edward Kennedy tell you. Quote, "The Boston Children's Chorus is one of the finest examples of a youth arts organization I have encountered. The chorus's achievements in a short amount of time are impressive, and the children themselves take my breath away whenever I hear them. The future of the Greater Boston's children is brighter because of the Boston Children's Chorus." Again, I'm not going to go over his CV, but I did want to mention, while looking at your website, I was astonished by a statistic that 100% of the graduates have gone on to college, including Harvard, Stanford, NYU, and Berklee College of Music. And I think just to finish, we can see that's what the arts can do. So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much, and thank you all for being here. So this is like a fireplace conversation. We don't have a fireplace, but we have a fantastic view, so we don't miss the fireplace. And I'll take a couple of minutes to tell you about my ideas of the citizen artist and the place of the arts in society in the 21st century. Then David will land that theory in the activities of the Boston Children's Chorus. And I invited David not only because he's a wonderful friend and, again, a real force in the arts community, but because the Boston Children's Chorus has a very close and closer association with BU. And again, among the brilliant young kids that have graduated from the Boston colleges, some have gone to Harvard or MIT or Berkeley, but some have aspired to a better institution and are studying at BU. And we hope that many more will join us. Really, the presentation was wonderful. And when we talk about technology, when we talk about the creation of meaning, and when we talk about the creation of emotion, when we're talking about being human, we're talking about the arts. You had a wonderful weekend where you could see all the cultural density of the city of Boston, what the museums and orchestras and theaters have to offer to us. And somehow, technology plays a role to enhance and sometimes to bring us away from the arts. We can see this now in YouTube, with our iPads, with internet. But let's go back, because we think that everything is changing so radically now that we're in the midst of something that we don't know what will happen and that we're in a different world. Well, this really started way back. And an example could go in 1881 with the Savoy Theatre in London. Was the first in the world to have electric bulbs illuminating the stage. And that was really incredible, fantastic. You have a sense of focusing on reality there on the stage, but there was something terrible. The lights dimmed out for the audience. And that's what's happening again now with technology. Going to the theater, going to a concert from the time of the Greeks was about community. We saw each other in the face. And with the lights came down on this audience and just lit this stage, something was lost. Of course, before that, we had gas lights, and gas lights gave many people headaches and fainted, not to mention that, unfortunately, tens of thousands of people died in fires in theaters all over London, Boston, New York, Mexico. I mean, Paris, any city, suffered this kind of fires. So technology plays a great role. And we should not be afraid of technology. But what are the arts really about? The arts are about bringing people together. The arts are not about entertainment. Entertainment is fine, and it's something that we all do. And I hope that our conversation today will be entertaining. But the arts also aspire to tell stories, to bring our dreams together, to tell us about other people, to celebrate diversity. We can get into the heart and soul of Mozart or Shakespeare or Dante or Cervantes through the arts in a much different way in which we can when we just read a book on history or through science. Again, it's meaning and emotion. And this brings to my attention what an artist in the 21st century needs to do and needs to be in order to be relevant for the 21st century. There's a great writer, I recommend her work to all of you. Her name is Martha Nussbaum. She's a professor at the University of Chicago, and she was just awarded a couple of weeks ago a major prize by the Spanish government in the middle of the crisis. And the title of her book is called Not for Profit. And she writes there that as many countries, among them, of course, the United States, focus more and more on education, K to 12 through higher education, on things that are useful, quote, quote, that will represent an income for the individual or for society, we tend to get more and more a very focused on a minute part of what life is about, and we don't get the critical thinking that an education based in the arts and the humanities can bring to us. And unless we have an education based in the humanities and the arts, we cannot have democracy and we cannot have freedom. It's very easy to have a majority that just turn on the TV, turn off their brain, and become uncritical consumers, and will go and vote for whatever looks nicer on the TV. And in order for America and for the world to be truly democratic and free, we need the arts. We need the experiences that you just had this last wonderful weekend, and we need to be engaged in a critical way. Now, what does that mean for a College of Fine Arts? And a College of Fine Arts within a large research university like BU? Well, this means a huge responsibility, because I believe that the standalone conservatory, and I studied in several conservatories or art schools that were very productive and just the right fit for the needs, say, of Napoleon, that needed musicians to play in the bands when they went to war, is not the place where we need musicians to be trained. We need a musician or a painter, a sculptor, to be part of the very complex society, global society in which we live. Someone who will be able to jump from performing at Symphony Hall or Carnegie Hall to do work in a community, to go teach in Africa or the Caribbean, to be able to have the same engagement no matter what the audience is. What I define as the citizen artist. And we're right now in an election year, both in Greece, in the States, in Mexico, in several other countries. And we think that being a citizen is about elections and about the vote. But no, being a citizen is about being engaged every day of your life in what's going out there, identifying opportunities to do something for your community, for your brothers and sisters. And in the case of an artist, it is very important that she or he acknowledges that the arts are a very, very powerful tool, as David will share with us shortly, to make the world a better place. So, of course, the education of an artist in the 21st century has to have a fundamental commitment to excellence. If you are not excellent in your artistic discipline, you are not an artist. But right now, when we have 400-600 people audition for a job in any of the major orchestras in the world, excellence, as far as it goes to technical ability, is on a very high standard. We also need the commitment to be able to move beyond your field and reach out to your audiences where they are. Shh! That sense of be quiet, stand alone, and do nothing that we hear in the concert hall is not how music happened in times of Beethoven or Mozart. People will chat, and again, that's what I love about the Boston Pops, that you can have the concert there and still you can mingle. And that's why Symphony Hall, like all the old concert halls in Europe, had to two roles. One was as a dance hall, and the other one was as a concert hall. They would take out all the seats, they still do that in Vienna, and have their balls for New Year and festivities. So again, you have to be, as a citizen artist, able to reach and engage with your audiences. You have to interact with the marketplace. In order to live your dream, you have to be savvy about how you get your funding, what you can sell and what you should never sell in the marketplace. And if you live your artistic dream, if you know how to interact with the marketplace, but finally and foremost, if you are aware of being a citizen artist that will make the world a better place and knows that the arts are an incredibly powerful tool, then you will be able to cope with the 21st century. One final example before I pass it on to David is that another program that we're doing, and we're doing many, working with communities and risk and the local and regional school systems, we have a program teaching music at prisons. We started with a male facility, and we will start with a prison for women next year, next academic year. And we discuss with the inmates the role of music in their lives. And we teach them how to sing, and they have a small chorus. Some of them were musicians before. Some will be there for life. Some have been on death row. And discussing with them, and they are very, very smart. They are complete, full BU students. They have to have the same SAT scores as any BU student. They say, if we see music as recreation, then the authorities at the prison will cut them out for us, because you are not in prison to have a good time. That's logical. If we see music as therapy, if we see music as education, then we have other opportunities. And that's one of the core message. It can be entertainment, it can be recreation, but it's not only that. At the end of the game, it is what makes us human. And I think that the Boston Children's Chorus is a wonderful example. So, David, why don't you share some of the stories? And again, I was flabbergasted when again, 3 weeks ago, the conductor of the new chorus of Berlin Philharmonic, arguably the best orchestra in the world, came and shared with us that they are going to copy the model of the Boston Children's Chorus. Amazing, congratulations.
It's a pleasure to be here with you this morning. I'm always inspired when I sit with Benjamin and hear his thoughts about the role that we have as artists in our communities. But before I get started, I just share a quick story. Just a few weeks ago, we had the privilege of being at, I'm doing something wrong, privilege of being at the ACLU when they were honoring the legendary Harry Belafonte. And he reminded us in his closing remarks after receiving the award of the words of the great civil rights activist and wonderful singer Paul Robeson, when he said to teach them your songs and they'll want to know who you are. And that idea is at the heart of everything we do at the Boston Children's Chorus. We come together because we believe in the community building power of music, particularly its ability to connect us more deeply to each other. If you know anything about Boston, you know of our history of racial discord and strife. And our founder, Hubie Jones, who is actually the Dean of Social Work here at BU for, okay, good, thank you. The Dean of Social Work here at BU has started many different organizations, over 30, 40 organizations in the city of Boston, all trying to tackle this issue, this social issue of how we are not connecting as communities. And it wasn't until he found the Boston Children's Chorus 9-10 years ago that he felt that he had really, his work had all come together. He said it last night at an event where we were. This is one of his proudest moments and something that certainly it will be his legacy. So just to give a quick sense of who we are, we started in 2003 with 20 kids in one choir in one level, and today we are in 12 choirs in 5 locations, and we serve about 450, and next year we'll serve about 500 kids. These kids come together from many different communities. So the one thing that you should know is our name, the Boston Children's Chorus, is a misnomer because first of all, it's not just Boston, and secondly, they're not all just children. I mean, they're someone's children, but they're not all teeny tots. So we serve kids between the ages of 7 and 18, and these kids come from over 80 different communities around Boston. They come together in programming, through our choral programming, through our touring programming, through a youth development program, and through an artists and scholars program that Benjamín described briefly. But they come together, and we are content and very happy about providing them the music education that they need and really excelling, you know, artistically, because we were clear that our social mission of really bringing people together across differences could not happen unless we were artistically amazing. No one would care what we were doing if we didn't have that quality there. But these kids are coming, and again, it's not about creating fine musicians. In one sense it is, but this is even more about creating productive and well-adjusted citizens. The changing demographics of our community call us to actually do something different about how we are relating to each other. And that's what we see with our students who come to us. We do about 50 performances a year, and we believe that when our kids walk on the stage, that they are showing Boston who we could be if we chose to work together. We have come together to build a model that we think is connecting not only the music education, the artistic excellence, the social impact, and also the youth development. And that model is based on the fact that one is more important than the other, but they all have to be connected. They're brilliant artistic and performance organizations out there, and there are brilliant youth development programs out there, but there's this sweet spot right in the middle that we feel like that we can actually move the dial on. And what gets us most excited for many of us, and I'm a musician by trade with a conservatory degree, many of us come to this work not because of the music, but because we believe in the power of the music to connect us and to really make amazing change, not only in the lives of these kids, but also in the lives of their families, because this is a commitment for the kids, but also a commitment for their families. So the kids are coming. You can imagine me coming from inner city Roxbury, connecting with a kid who's from Wellesley, which is a much more affluent neighborhood, kids who would never have the chance really to connect with each other. And what we're doing is creating the conditions for them to harmonize both socially and through that shared love of music. But this model that we've developed and again, just keep in mind we're 9 years old, so we're still learning. We totally haven't figured it out, but we're on the right path. But this model that we've developed has gotten a lot of interest from around the city, the country, and around the world as well. There have been 5 other courses in the country that have been modeled on the Boston Children's Chorus. Cities like Detroit who say, we want to do something like this. We've got some of the same issues, and we want to use music to help bring our community together. Can you help us think about it? And so we very much have been like, we'd be happy to share with you, because this is not about the Boston Children's Chorus. This is not about David, but this is about changing the trajectory and the perspective of the kids. It will be the future and will lead us and will teach us as adults how to engage with people who are different from us. And very recently, as part of our Artists and Scholars residency, Simon Howse, who is the conductor for the Berlin Philharmonic Chorus and also the Birmingham Symphony Chorus, Grammy Award winning, who's all around the world working with all types of choruses, both adult and children's choruses. It was when he came here and said he had a charge by the Berlin Philharmonic to begin a chorus. For 7-8 years, Berlin Philharmonic has used dance to introduce children to classical music, and they're realizing that that's not working. So they've now decided that singing is the way to introduce kids from different backgrounds, and they looked at all various programs around the world and decided that it was the Boston Children's Chorus that they wanted to model, not only for the artistic excellence, but our ability to recruit and maintain a very diverse pool of singers. not always the easiest thing, particularly in a city like Boston where we live in our silos and very rarely live. A quick story, I remember 3-4 years ago, a mother who had grown up in Roxbury. I don't know how many of you must be familiar, you came to school here. So lived in Roxbury. She was 34 years old all her life. And I said to her, we're going to have our official photo in the public garden. And she looked at me, she says, where's that? And I was like, I thought she was joking. I was like, come on, really? The public garden. And she's like, no, what? T-stop. And I was like, oh my God, you've never been to the public garden. And that's the same way from Roxbury, but I remember talking to a family from Wellesley. We were having our performance at Roxbury Community College, and she called me, lovely, lovely woman. She called me the day before and said, Sarah won't be able to perform in the chorus tomorrow's concert. And I was like, well, tell me why. Well, we've never been to Roxbury. And I was like, well, today's your day. So if you'd like your daughter to be in the chorus, she will definitely sing in Roxbury. And she's like, well, we've just heard, and, we just don't feel comfortable. And I said, well, if I came to Wellesley and drove you to Roxbury, would you come? She's like, yeah, I would. So I had to schlep out to Wellesley, drive this lady in. But it's that kind of change. It's actually helping people to understand the richness that is around us if we only break out of our own silos. And the music allows us to do that. In our rehearsals, it's not your typical rehearsal. For example, these 7-year-old kids, after a full day of school, are coming to us for 2 hours. And of that 2 hours, 30 minutes is music education. But this is not, let's do music education, then let's do social impact stuff, and then let's do the music. It's all connected. So we are talking about issues that families don't even like to talk about. And I think this model that we've talked about is built a lot on partnerships. Benjamin talks about the partnership with BU, which we're incredibly excited about because we believe in the work that we're doing. We've got great anecdotal stories, but part of this is really needing the rigorous data to support, the fact that arts has an amazing impact on kids. So part of this relationship with BU is developing a 4 to 5 year research program, a program evaluation, and then a longitudinal study to help us articulate. We're proud of the fact that all of our graduates have gone off to secondary school, but why is it? What was it about the Boston Children's Chorus that contributed to their success and moving forward? And the good thing about us is we're 9 years old, so the best years are still ahead of us. Another partnership, when we talk about the role of artists in society, one thing I think we have to be very clear about is that we are so important. And we think we're so important, but I'm not convinced that everybody else believes the same thing. So we first of all have to redefine our role, about what role we want to play, and not allow someone else, not other outside organizations, pundits, to tell us what our role is in society. So first of all, we have to figure out what role we will play. Secondly, we have to make sure that we're relevant, that we're not, again, I call them temples of culture. I have this beautiful building, and I'm going to tell you when you have to hear the performance, what time you have to come, where you're going to go, what you're going to hear, and how you're going to listen to it. I'm not sure that that's the future for our sector. And so until you're able to unpack that, to move yourself out of the way and say, what is it that our communities need? How are we going to hear from them and reflect what they're seeing? And an interesting example, we are partnering in our 10th anniversary, which begins in September, with the ICA, the Institute of Contemporary Art, on a dance choral commission. The first time the ICA has ever worked with a fledgling organization like the Boston Children's Chorus. So this is a big endeavor for us. And we commissioned an amazing composer. His name is DBR. Well, he goes by DBR. It's Daniel Bernard Romain, who is a Haitian-American composer who has worked with, pop artists like Shakira and Rihanna, but also with symphonies and, dance companies all around the world. So we've commissioned him to do this work, and we've commissioned a choreographer and the librettist, or they call him a spoken word person, and we're ready to do this. But when Daniel, DBR, presented the content of what this was going to be, I paused, and it's called King, and I'm giving you an inside scoop because this has not been revealed to the general public. It's going to be a huge announcement, but the idea, it's called King, and I thought, oh, Martin Luther King, that's good, we resonate with him. King Kong, and I was like, now, King Kong, now help me understand. And the idea, if you'll sort of bear with me, is that you have King Kong, who is this mangled young African-American kid, just sort of mangled, who falls in love with this beautiful, beautiful, gorgeous, white, older lady. So I thought about this, and my first reaction was, how stereotypical, how trite, haven't we done this before? And why do you think the children's chorus, who's supposed to sing beautiful, sweet music and make people very happy, how can we actually take this on? And as I began to sit with this, I thought, this is exactly what we need to be putting in front. Because again, to Benjamin's point, art is not just about the beauty. It's not just about, the practice itself, but it should challenge us. It should challenge us to think about who we are as people. And when you think about the kids that we're serving and the relevance of the subject matter of King, it's so pertinent. We're looking at race issues every day. It hasn't gone away, and I've got many stories to tell you if you have the time of how I know it's not going away, but also this dynamic of age and what it means in our society. So the fact that we as a children's course, again, doing things that we're not supposed to do, are actually tackling these tough issues, I said it's absolutely what we have to do because it's relevant. It makes sense to what people are dealing with today. And until we as artists can sort of put ourselves aside and say, if I don't go to an art exhibit or to some sort of performance and don't feel upset, angry, happy, something, we're not doing our work. So part of the children's course movement is really changing the way that people think about us as artists, because first of all, that we have to debunk the myths. The children's choruses can't sing at high levels of art. They're supposed to be cute, and that they really are not that relevant. And so what we're trying to do is reposition ourselves not only as citizens of change through the arts perspective, but the fact that youth have a voice that we need to listen to. So I think as we think about arts in society and the roles that we as leaders need to face, these are the things that we need to think about. Who are we? How do we redefine ourselves? How do we remain relevant? And then the third thing, if, democracy and, society is about the good of humankind and human people, then arts has to be at the center of the conversation. We can't be on the outskirts. We need to be at the center. And so when people see me at the Chamber of Commerce events and they see me at all these various, they're like, oh, Boston Chill, like, what are you doing here? I'm like, yeah, we need to be here. You can learn from us. We need to be at the table. So it also demands us to step outside of our comfort zone. I'm preaching to the choir. You already get it, right? So it's how do we take this outside and begin to help people understand the role, because I'm not convinced that they're understanding it. We talk about the power of arts and music. We get it, but we're not reflecting that in our budgets, in the funding that's there, and also the importance in the education system. So today is not about depressing you, but it's saying that we have work to do as artists. And I challenge you all to go back to your communities and think about what role you will play. And if you're in the Boston area, I challenge you to get involved with the Boston Children's Course to learn more about what we're doing to be a force in Boston, to bring Boston's communities together through the power of music. And as I close, I'll end with the quote that I started with when Paul Robeson said that if you teach them your songs, they'll want to get to know you. Part of our programming is traveling abroad. So we've been to Mexico, we've been to the UK, we've been to Japan, and recently we were in Jordan. So when I told our parents we're going to Jordan, they were like, Jordan? Where's that? And I'm like, yeah, in the Middle East. I know it's crazy, but we're going there. And it was we were invited by King Abdullah, and it was an amazing, amazing experience. And I remember the story of one young lady, Nomi, who lived in Framingham. Nomi was 16 at the time and Jewish. And we were in Jordan, in the middle of a place that harbors Palestinian refugees. So during the tour, we're singing with them, we're dancing, we're doing all kinds of things together. During the middle of the tour, we were much like this in a sort of round table saying to the kids, tell us what you're experiencing. What does this feel like? What did you expect and not? And so the kids are popping up and saying, oh, I didn't expect this, or I didn't know the women were going to be wearing jeans. That's kind of cool. But Nomi raises her hand, 16, young, naive. She says, all my life I've been taught to dislike Palestinians. And she said, I realized, and of course, and I get goosebumps every time I tell a story, she began to weep. And she says, I realized that I had never met a Palestinian. And she said, shame on me for disliking someone I had never met. I never would have had this experience had I not sung with these people. And I have to go back to my community and tell them that we can't make judgments about people until, she's 16 years old. And we're like, we're all a mess at this point, because I said to our staff, I said, if we impacted one child, then we have done our job. this trip was worth it, and we can go home now. You know, so I think it's that notion that if we actually are creating art, it's great to view it but it's much more powerful to experience it and to participate in it. And that's exactly what we're hoping through the Boston Children's Course, that we give these kids from all different backgrounds. This is not a wealthy course. This is not a course for rich kids. This is a course where everyone who has a desire to sing has a place to participate. So thank you for the opportunity. I get excited every time I talk about this work, which is why I go to work every morning. And it's always a pleasure to share the work that we're doing and look forward to working with BU and other partners to advance this work. So thank you for your time, and I think we open it up for questions at this point. Oh, you don't need this, I do.
We will only ask you to give us a minute or a few seconds so that the mic goes there, because we're taping the session. And we'll love to get your comments, your feedback, and if we may, and we're able to answer any questions that you may have. So, we will hand you the microphone.
I live in Arizona, so, but I'm from here. I've been hearing that El Sistema from Venezuela, that they're teaching it here at one of the universities. I'm wondering if are there a whole lot of fantastic things like this going on right here that you're connected with? And for people far away who are involved with music, how might they connect with it? I have one other question, if you have time. Musicians, I'm not a musician myself. I'm deeply involved with musicians. I paint stuff that has to do with music. And musicians I know are totally just involved in music, and like very little else really matters. And sometimes they're good teachers and sometimes they're not. And the life is very tough for them right now with the way, like you were saying, what people values and economy. Ideas on how to help these musicians connect?
I can start. El Sistema is a wonderful program that started in Venezuela almost 30 years ago, or a little bit more even. And right now, 1 in every 10 or 11 people in Venezuela has a member of the family who has been involved there. The Boston Children's Chorus, and David can tell us more about that, invited last year Maria Guinaldes, who is the, let's say, the choral part of El Sistema. And here at BU, we are working with advising different youth orchestras around the world, and we have a very close partnership with another wonderful institution, the Boston Youth Symphony Orchestra, BYSO, who is also very close to Boston Children's Chorus. And also our colleagues at NEC have a program, and now our friends at Longy School of Music have another program inspired in El Sistema. The main point that I would like to underline is that El Sistema is federally funded, and the arts and arts education in Venezuela, like in France, like in Mexico, are managed from the federal government, not by state governments, and they are funded very, very generously. So there are many lessons to be learned from El Sistema, but it's not a model that we can just copy like a cookbook recipe and implement elsewhere. As a matter of fact, it has not been successfully implemented in the long term anywhere else but in Venezuela. In some places, because the people implementing them have artistic or political aspirations, and they twist the mission. In other places, because there's not enough funding. And again, I think that now every artist, every painter, every musician, every actor, every performer, dancer is also a teacher. And among the education of the citizen artist is, again, someone like David who's able to communicate his ideas clearly, who has an engagement with social issues. And I think that's the way in which we can prepare an artist for the 21st century, not only to be able to play beautifully and hide behind the instrument or hide behind the voice, but to be vocal in different ways.
That's right. And when I talk about we have to reinvent ourselves and make sure that we're relevant, the notion that we can go in ourselves and do our art, and that's all we want to do, I don't know that that's sustainable. And I think we as artists tend to think that that's all that's important, but you have to make sure that there's someone who cares about it on the outside. So I think what we're doing here at BU is trying to cultivate that. And I don't know that many, conservatories, universities are thinking about that. The same thing has happened in the medical field. Doctors have so long thought about, we are doctors, we have all the information, this is what you need, and we don't really need to connect with you. And you're having to reteach people empathy and how do you connect with your patients. It's the same movement that we need to feel, that you have to empower people and not get so down on ourselves that no one cares about our art and we're working hard and this is important. But I think about that violinist who just sits on that stage and does this all day without any sense of who is listening. Again, that entitlement is not going to get us any further. And perhaps is why we're in the place that we are now, because we've thought of ourselves as so special and so elite that we've moved ourselves into this little bubble and not allowed people in. So I don't know what the answer is, but we do have to think differently about how do we redefine ourselves. And when you're working with musicians who are so inwardly focused, trying to figure out how to get them involved and re-energizing them, because that's what we have a program where we work with Boston Public School, well, not only Boston Public School music educators, but so many of them have at one point were so excited about the art, but you get into this rut and you kind of forget why you were even excited about it. So what we feel like we're doing is re-energizing them, giving them a better sense that there's so much more that you're doing, and valuing them in a new way. So I think the way that we used to think of ourselves as artists has to shift. And I think there's a whole new movement. And I think large orchestras are really trying to figure this out. Dance companies are trying to figure this out. And there are a lot of smaller ensembles that have new energy, that are really trying to say, we are wanting to be a part of the community. So break down that fourth wall and really invite people in. So I think it has to be a mind shift that we as a sector, so when I talk about redefining, we have to redefine it. We can't wait for someone else to tell us that what we're doing is the right thing or this is what it means. So
thank you, that's a great question. Yes.
Hi. Yeah, I have a question about something that has been bothering me for quite some time. That, when I see this whole concept of community and how music can bring community together, the problem that I have is it always seems to be focused on children and college students. And having been a musician, amateur all my life, and now as I'm middle-aged, I'm a middle-aged citizen artist, I guess, I see a whole group of friends and people that either never sang before and want to, or want to pick up the violin at the age of 50, but aren't sure about it, and trying to find this type of a group, kind of translate your group, and just push it along the adult life cycle to my age group would be great, because there's a vast wasteland of nothing there for us to do. And it bothers me because I always feel like, we care about children, college students, and then we're adults, and then like 45 there's this, and then maybe you've been an athlete as an adult or in college, and then you're 45 or 50, kids are gone, and now you're like, I'm still an athlete, I can still do stuff, and there's nothing for me. Where's my community that's organized that says, I'd like to meet a 50-year-old violinist in Roxbury who just started. I live in Newton. I don't know how I'll find that person. Do you see what I'm saying? So has BU thought of anything in terms of tapping that community of unmet, I think, needs?
Yeah, through MET, through the Alumni College, we have several programs that are open to people of all ages. And there's a great demand. That's interesting, more in visual arts than in music so far. I don't know if people have the misconception that it's impossible to pick up the violin or the cello when you are old. It's difficult, but it's not impossible. It's impossible to become Yo-Yo Ma, but let me tell you something. It's impossible to become Yo-Yo Ma even if you are 4 years old. So if you have the right expectations, picking up an instrument at any age is absolutely possible. And you can also become a composer. And again, when we're talking about doctors, I want to brag that our former president of BU, Dr. Chabonian, who is one of the greatest cardiologists in the world, and is also a very good pianist, is now studying music composition, and he's doing extremely well. So we thank you for underlying this to us, because there's, I mean, we baby boomers are getting to a point where we have very important numbers.
And money.
Exactly. So that's something that we have to do more. And I don't know why there has been so far more interest in theater and in visual arts and in music, but we'll work on that.
I wonder if you could say something about the problem of making the arts more affordable. I live in New York City, where you could go to a concert or an opera every night of the week and still not exhaust all the possibilities, but most of them are out of the reach of most people. And when you subscribe to the Philharmonic or the Metropolitan Opera, they ask you for a contribution in addition to your... So it seems to me there's a real need in talking about this engagement with the community. So I'd really like to hear your ideas on that.
Yes. Do you want to go ahead?
Start and I'll
okay. Again, I think that New York, a wonderful city, is a very unique place in the world. And they cater not only to the local New Yorkers, but to the tourist industry. When you go to New York, you go to Broadway show, you go to the Metropolitan Museum, you go to the Metropolitan Opera. Like when you go to Italy, you eat spaghetti. And the challenge is to know that your local artistic institutions can be and need to be engaged with their local communities and their local communities with them. It's only through this partnership where we will be able to make the admission barrier workable. It's different in many countries. And this was written by Alexis de Tocqueville way back in the 19th century, whereas in France this will be taken by the government, and in England by a nobleman. In America this is managed by citizens. We need to find an equation between the needs of the artists that have to make a living, to put a roof on top of their family and more than survive, and on the other hand to keep access to everyone. And just like there's a creation of meaning when there's a communication between the artist and the audience, and that's where the magic happens, we need to create very innovative ways in which we can bring the prices down. Part of the problem is New York. I'll tell you why. The problem is that all the small artistic venues, all the small museums, all the small orchestras, regional orchestras, aspire to be like their big sisters. And they overspend money in new facilities. This happened in Philadelphia, and luckily just 10 days ago they are out of bankruptcy, but they went into bankruptcy because their dreams were higher than the reality, and they were not very savvy in the business model. We have to keep a scale that is workable that is healthy. And when we talk about the non-profit world, I would like to change that into the not for extreme profit. But institutions like the Boston Children's Chorus need to make some profit in order to be viable.
Yeah. And the other, just to touch on that, this notion of competition, I think, is what we're faced with. There are probably thousands of opportunities for people to engage in arts, and it's, there, for instance, in their empty houses. I was just at a performance last night with the Boston Landmarks Orchestra, half the house filled, and they couldn't give away the tickets. So I think there are opportunities out there. We just have to think differently around what is art and how we think about what's amazing and what's, mediocre. Would I go see a children's chorus, but you're getting a very different kind of performance than you would get if you were to go to see some adult, choir, perhaps. So I think this notion of competition, that there needs to be more collaboration, and perhaps then things could come down a bit. But I also am convinced that if we figure out how that this work has to be funded, then we can move that. We can create different funding models, and then we can rely on some other source, so it doesn't have to come on the backs of the people who are there. But I would argue to say that there's so much out there, and there's so much opportunity to engage. We just think about it. We have to go to the Metropolitan Opera, or we have to go to the Met or something like that. But there are all these wonderful arts experiences that are much more. You can get your hands closer to if you think about them, and not just the big gorillas, in the room. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
I just want to make a comment to address Barbara's issue. I live in Minnesota, and the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra goes to community venues like churches, synagogues, and the tickets are either $10 or $25, and they have always been in the black. I don't know how they do it. I think it's a marvelous orchestra. But that I think that what their whole role is to try to make it's chamber orchestra, it's a very unique type of music, but it's, they've certainly worked out how to make that kind of music accessible for everyone.
And that's exactly those cases of success stories that we're very interested in sharing with our students and our community, in order to see what are the lessons learned and what can we copy and what we can't copy of each individual success story.
There's just one thing, that this notion of going into communities, I think, is a very powerful one, but it has to be a relationship. So often I tell the story of Alvin Ailey that comes to Boston every year, and the organization that presents him every year. It's the only time that you see anything about this particular organization is when Alvin Ailey comes. So for me, it's more about butts and seats instead of let's really form a meaningful relationship with so I think this notion of going out in communities is fantastic, but if I can only afford it, in that community, and I'm not really invited to the home of that space, these are things we have to sort of unpackage. And what are the messages what are the messages that are being sent, and what are the messages that we want to deliver? So I think we've got so much work, because while that program is, the BSO does the same thing. They do community concerts around the city, and it makes it more accessible for those people. But again, it's a great gesture, but I'd love to hear, as we sort of continue doing this work, sort of what are the messages that's being sent to those various communities of, you can see us here, but you can't come over here and see us, first of all, because you can't afford it, and second of all, because you're not invited into the space. So there are a lot of issues that we have to tackle as artists, and as communities, to think about what is the relationship between the communities that we're trying to serve and the art that we're trying to share. Yes.
I'm curious about your 100% going on to college, and that led me to wonder what a typical experience of one of your chorus members is over a day, a week, and a year.
characterize the organization as a chorus and then some. So we're really a social organization. I mean, you know, we do music incredibly well, but what a typical week looks like for the more advanced choirs, those are the kids who are older, they come twice a week. Remember, they're doing, this particular choir is doing probably 30 performances, 25 to 30 performances a year. So, and they have the 2 rehearsals twice a week with 2 hours, and they're also doing their community service. But to the point around the college success, so we have relationships with these kids. So a young man came to me the other day, his name's David, African-American kid, who is graduating this year. And of course, we're having a conversation, what is your plan? You know, what are you doing? What are you doing after school? And he says, well, I'm going to one of the community colleges, which is great. I said, but what is it you really, really want to do? He said, I'd love to go to the Boston Conservatory. And I said, well, did you audition? Yes, I did audition. Did you get in? Well, I did, but this didn't happen and something like that. So I got in, and I couldn't afford it, was the bottom line. And I said, first of all, you need to tell us this. You need to let us know, because we have not financial resources, but we have connections that we can, you know, it's about relationships. We can pick up the phone and make some calls and see what can happen. Little did I know, I was meeting with the president of the Boston Conservatory. They have a full ride scholarship for students from his school to Boston Conservatory that no one ever told him about. So for us to be able to have those conversations with kids around what is your trajectory, and letting them know that we care about them and that we're holding them accountable, and that our expectation is so incredibly high, you know, that they want to do well. So I don't think that the actual experience in the week's time is much different from another course, other than you have the music education. You're really talking about issues of race and poverty and hunger and war and things of that nature. But I think the reality is that the relationships that we're building with these kids and the expectation that we have, because you all know, if you expect little things from kids, they'll give you little. But if you have big expectations, they rise to them every single time. So trying to make sure, and even in our programming, that we are partnering with organizations that can help us train our kids, because even kids from the wealthier towns are not getting the counseling that they need for schools. We have a kid who lives in, I can't name the town, but in the western suburbs, very affluent, and she came to us, she says, I'm trying to think about conservatory versus, you know, liberal arts college. You know, what should I do? I was like, well, did you talk to your counselor? First question, right? Well, no, she doesn't really know, and she just thought I should do blah, 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 blah. So we find ourselves in that business as well. And as an organization that's relevant and cares, we have to do that work. I can't tell you how many times I've been asked to go to divorce court because a family's going through a divorce and they want me to choose sides, right? So I think there's work. The kids come to us and say, I don't have food at home. What can you do? Or there's abuse in my home. What are we supposed to? They didn't teach me this at the conservatory. How do you manage these kinds of issues and relationships? And we're responsible. So the kids will tell us things, sometimes too much, that they wouldn't even have this discussion with their families. And, you know, I think so that sort of intimacy, that level of care and concern, and the level of belief that we have in them and the expectation that we have in them drives them to actually want to be their best selves. And I think I'd love to say that, you know, these kids live in a test tube and it's all Boston Children's Chorus. That's not the reality. But we feel strongly that we're contributing to their success, and their families will say this. I remember the mother who came to me and said, you know, my daughter joined this course at age 9, and she would not even look at people in the face, that she wouldn't look at them. She never held her head up. She had no friends. She says after a year, she's singing in front of people. She has in front of the classroom. She feels so confident, and it's changed her life, and I need to make a donation. I was like, yeah, love that. So, but I think the reality is that the mother told us that. You know, she accredited to her experience because people cared about them. And I think as artists, we care about our work, but we also have to care about the people whom we're trying to share this work with. So.
I'd just like to make a comment. You're also, I think, spending a critical amount of time with them. Not an hour a week, or once every 6 months. It's 4 hours a week is a relationship.
And I'm glad that you say that, because most people say, because if you look at a custodial program, like an after-school program where you're playing sports, you're there 5 days a week. And so people will say, well, you know, it's not a lot of time you're spending. And I say to them, it's not about the quantity, it's about the quality of time that you're spending with these kids. So while it's 4 hours a week plus some, it's the time that that's spent together. That it's not just come in and do your thing, but it's really trying to get to know them. And the worst thing for me as executive director, as we've grown, is that I don't know every child by name. And that's the worst feeling, because they certainly know you and they watch everything you do. And trying to make sure you keep that level of intimacy in an organization is incredibly important, or at least it is for us.
I guess, David, I'd like to tell you about one of your success stories. I work with somebody whose daughter's in your chorus, in your choir. And I remember when he first started talking to me about the choir, he'd say, "Oh, you know how difficult it is for my wife to get down there, and twice a week." And his last statement, I think a couple of weeks ago, after showing me all these videos of his daughter, was, "How do I get my daughter to stop singing?" You know, he says, "Did Beethoven have that problem?" You know. So anyway, I just wanted to share with you that success. But it seems to me that what I've heard a lot from both of you is about everything. Arts is about conversations, and some of those conversations are difficult. Some of them are broken, and some of them are just conversations that you guys enable. So I think you just keep doing what you're doing, because it sounds like you're doing the right thing. So.
Staff member to learn about the connections that BU has with the community, and I'm sure that that sentiment is shared with all of you as alumni, and the Children's Chorus is a wonderful example of that. So David and Dean Juarez, thank you so very much for joining us this morning.